Nowadays, we have GPS and satellites. If you want to know if there's an island somewhere, it's pretty easy to figure it out and be correct. But long before GPS, the only thing a map maker had to rely on was the reports of sailors. And that's where phantom islands come from. Erroneous reports, maybe from wrong coordinates or just poor observances, led to mapped out islands that just weren't there. I mean, icebergs can look like islands if you're tired enough. Or, to be fair, sometimes they did exist, they were just in another place and already well known. Maybe some of these islands were real, and shifting oceans, volcanic activity, or even something like an earthquake sank them. Or, maybe the cartographer just wanted to add his own special touch to the map. Let's take a look at some of the most famous phantom islands, along with some of my personal favorites. Remember, a phantom island is technically any island that showed up on a map, but it's not actually there in real life. Some you'd never think of. For example, California was thought to be an island. In fact, Stanford University has a whole collection of maps that show the area as an island, like 1,000 plus maps that are just completely wrong. Although, to be fair, the Baja Peninsula at the bottom of California does stick out, so if you only saw that, I see why you might think there's like a strait separating it from the mainland. To be clear, I'm not talking about the modern state of California. It was the peninsula that led to the perception. Of course, we all know Atlantis, but that one's kind of stupid. It's technically a phantom island because people were putting it on their maps, but they didn't have any evidence of it being anywhere. One of my personal favorites is Crocker Land. Arctic explorer Robert Peary reported seeing it somewhere north of Ellesmere Island, the northernmost tip of Canada, in 1906. However, he seems to have just been making it up to try and get more money from George Crocker, who was helping pay for his exploring mission. They went back to find it later, and it just wasn't there, and it didn't even work, because Crocker never gave him any more money. Keenan Land was a phantom island north of Alaska that was described by John Keenan, who landed on the island and even hoisted an American flag on it, at least according to him. Pretty impressive given that there's no island there and no one else can find it. Some phantom islands aren't just trolls, though. Cyanida Island in the Black Sea off the coast of Bulgaria probably did used to exist. Sadly, it was probably destroyed by earthquakes, landslides, and erosion from getting generally beat up on by waves on the west coast of the Black Sea. It stopped being included on maps about 500 years ago because it just wasn't there anymore. I would never forget New South Greenland, which I did a video on a long time ago. The shape of the island matches up exactly with a peninsula several hundred kilometers away, so the captain almost definitely just had his coordinates very wrong. That captain's name was Benjamin Morel, and maybe he didn't have his coordinates wrong because it turns out he made up another phantom island, named Morel's Island, very classy. It was at the northwestern end of the Hawaiian chain, and he claimed to have landed on the island. But again, the island isn't there. Maybe he's just a terrible navigator and he was actually on Kier Island, way to the east. However, at this point, I'm starting to not buy that. Because before landing on the non existent Morel Island, he landed on Byers Island, which also doesn't exist. And a man by the name of James Byers was finding Morel's voyage. Hmm, it's interesting that that keeps happening. Anyways, naming the island after him didn't work again because Byers didn't give him any more money after that. Oh, wait, there's more about this guy? There's also a log from someone else, John Keeler, who voyaged with Morrill, that contradicts all his made up claims. Okay, I think we've said enough about this guy. Although I would like to add that at one point he had 13 of his crew killed and eaten by islanders while they were on a beach collecting freaking sea cucumbers. Okay, that's all I have to say about him. Why were they collecting sea cucumbers? Another cool one is Falcon Island in the Tonga group. It existed sometimes. First observed in 1865, it was sometimes visible and sometimes not, as in it was literally growing and shrinking all the time. In the late 19th century, the volcanic island grew up to 50 feet out of the water, only to disappear back below the waves in under 4 years. It eventually reached over 150 meters in height before collapsing as the result of an eruption in 1949. Apparently, the old king of Tonga loved the island so much, and he'd sometimes have concrete poured on the summit to keep the top above the waves. Unfortunately, the oceanographer who recounts this, Henry Stommel, doesn't provide a source in his book, so I can't confirm if that's true or not, but it's pretty funny regardless. Finally, Sandy Island is cool because it took them so long to realize that it wasn't actually there, as in it was literally on Google Maps until 2012. That's kind of stupid because the French had literally confirmed it wasn't there as early as 1974, and nobody had reported seeing it in decades. It was still on some maps because it was included in the World Vector Shoreline Database, the WVS, which is the standard global coastline dataset used by the scientific community. So if you want to make your own Phantom Island, you just have to try and get it in there. Before we finish, I want to talk about what I call the reverse Phantom Island, Landsat Island. Nobody knew it existed until it was discovered in 1976 during a survey of the Canadian coastline using a Landsat satellite. After the discovery, they sent out a helicopter to verify the island. The hydrographer being lowered from the helicopter onto the island almost got into a very unfortunate encounter with the polar bear living there, since its white fur blended into the icy background. Luckily, they were able to pull him back into the helicopter, although he never actually got to step on the island. Have you ever heard of any phantom islands? Those were some of my personal favorites, but there are hundreds that have been listed on maps over the centuries. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about phantom islands, check out Henry Stommel's book, Lost Islands, and I'll see you again soon with another video. Bye.